At a very young age, I had two influences. One was my cousin. I had a cousin named Terry who was into kung fu and comic books. So a lot of the work he used to draw would be like Bruce Lee, Spider-Man, and just stuff like that. And I was always intrigued with his ability to draw.
You are listening to Vector Maestros.
This is DTM with Vector Maestros, episode number 5, and a great interview featuring Kevin MisterSoul Harp. Our goal is to encourage everyone to explore their creativity and master the pen tool. We're proudly supported by Microsoft Surface, MICAtlanta, ArtistKing.org, and AzaleaCreativeGroup.com. Please follow the work of Kevin MisterSoul Harp on social medias and links found in the description of this podcast. Now, on to our Vector Maestro interview with MisterSoul216.
My name is Kevin Harp. My friends and colleagues call me Mr. Soul, Soul for short, Cleveland, Ohio. And I've been in Atlanta for 20 years this year.
Yeah, it's a long time, huh?
Yes, sir.
So you kind of from Atlanta almost now.
I'm born and raised and represent the city of Cleveland, Ohio. This is the city that made me a man. I went to preschool, kindergarten, elementary, junior high, and high school, all graduated in Cleveland. And those are the periods that define you as a adolescent and as a man. So,
all right.
But I love Atlanta. Atlanta's definitely home too.
Yeah. To keep it strong for 20 years, you gotta love something about ATL.
Yeah.
So growing up, what kind of art did you start getting into, and who inspired you at that time?
At a very young age, I had two influences. One was my cousin. I had a cousin named Terry who was into kung fu and comic books. So a lot of the work he used to draw would be like Bruce Lee, Spider-Man, and just stuff like that. And I was always intrigued with his ability to draw. When I was in the first grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. Alice Cooper, who was also an artist. And so for art class in the first grade, she would teach us, certain things. Like one of the main things I remember with her, she taught us how to create complex objects. Like we used to draw these houses using primitive shapes. Mm-hmm. Primitive shapes being squares, rectangles, and triangles and circles. By the time I got to the 4th grade, I was still following my cousin. But around about the 4th grade is when hip hop culture was really establishing itself, and a movie named Beat Street came out. Mm-hmm. In this movie, which pretty much visualizes the first commercial release that kind of really mainstream told a story about hip hop and its elements. There was a character named Ramo, who was the graffiti artist. So I instantly gravitated to that character because I was already interested in art. And then hip hop was, I was growing up with this new culture of hip hop and the music. And so graffiti art was the influence that made me feel like I had a part or a place in hip hop. Mm-hmm. Not long after that, there's a documentary that came out. There's a documentary that came out called Style Wars, which was more of a documentary approach about the movement in the South Bronx with the Rocksteady crew and all the old school hip hop legends, particularly the graffiti artists. The documentary spoke a lot on the various elements of hip hop, but it was focused on graffiti artists. So once I saw that, I knew that was my influence. It was like a raw form of expression. It wasn't something that these kids were taught. It was something they did out of passion and purpose. And so I chose those two words to define my purpose, to define my path or my placement in art. Flash forward so I did that up into 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. 7th grade I got with a couple of junior high partners of mine, Ryan Janke and Osman Muhammad. These were my two artistic partners in junior high school. And again, just through fellowshipping with other artists, I became even more interested to know that there were people like me. Because I always felt like being an artist was different because everybody couldn't do it. Like everybody tried to sing, everybody tried to dance, everybody tried to play basketball, everybody tried to be a pimp, but everybody didn't try to be an artist. And so when I met other artists, that created more interest. Then the ultimate defining point, was when we got to high school. My friend Osmond and I were seeking a guy who was a senior at the time when we got there as freshmen. His name was Sano. Sano was like Sano to Cleveland was like Lee or Dondi or Scene to what New York was. And if you're a graffiti artist, you'll know that correlation. So Sano was our Lee, Scene, Dondi. He was a graffiti artist. He was the head of a crew called Doing Everything Funky, and that's what gave us that's who gave us our tutelage in terms of showing us techniques, teaching us how to spray paint, teaching us how to blend markers, teaching us how to, rack paint, steal art supplies, everything we needed to do to have an opportunity and a chance. So I just texted him the other day because I painted this mural, and I just thanked him for taking us under his wing. That guy is definitely the reason why I pursued art in the way that I had. Like he was so cold, it was like, yo, I gotta be like this guy. We gotta be like this guy. So he put us down with the crew, and then from around 88, 89 up until now, he's always just been a focal figure. So that's my little history.
All right.
Yeah.
It's deep. For real. So, do you remember when you first heard about Adobe Illustrator? And what did you hear about it? Did someone tell you about it? And do you remember your first illustration?
I was introduced to the computer around about 92, 93. Dang. I was a student at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. Before I got to my computer courses or classes, I met this guy, Ben Smith. He was a graffiti artist in Pittsburgh. And he was a graduate from the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. And we had heard his name. I don't even know how we ended up getting connected, but it was another guy. This would be the second person who I would say took me under his wing because he was older than me. He had used Photoshop and saw my work. And he was like, yo, you need to be using Photoshop. This is what you need to do. So Photoshop was the first thing that I learned. As I progressed and got to my computer classes, we used a program called Freehand. It was called Aldous Freehand. Aldous is not even a company no more. They were bought by Macromedia, which isn't a company anymore. Yeah. But I started using Freehand. I used Freehand from 93, 94, all the way up to 2000, maybe to about 2001. And a friend of mine, Derek Harris, rest in peace, Rick, was a guy that I met down here who was into fashion design. And he used Illustrator. He used to, design his clothes in Illustrator. And he showed me some of the basics, and I decided to switch from there. So when I started with Illustrator, it was like Illustrator 3.0 or something crazy like that back in the day. And I was mainly using it to, do logos and stuff like that, even before I really got into the illustration aspect of it. So, yeah, that's when I started off with Photoshop. And interestingly enough, when for much of that time, most of my work was done. I spent much of my time in Photoshop. So it was like reverse, where I would spend like maybe 15% of my time in Illustrator to do layouts and type work, and then I would just do most of my artwork, because I was looking at Photoshop as a tool for me to do, as an extension for me to do illustration, airbrushed out, painterly work. But then I started doing my illustrations in Illustrator because of scalability and because I was just a real big fan of the clean, crisp lines. And so now my workflow is probably like 85-90% Illustrator, then the rest would be like Photoshop.
Yeah. Do you remember your first illustration when you was early in the days when you were learning?
Not really, because I did I really started getting heavy in Illustrator. I was doing t-shirt graphics, so I wasn't doing a lot of illustration work at the time. I was doing more graphic work, so doing t-shirt designs for a brand that I worked with from 98 till about 2001, 2002.
Okay.
So I don't remember what my first piece was, but I do remember 90. That might be 99, 2000, 2001 began my heavy Illustrator years. Now that I think back on it.
And now I'm an old dude too. I'm not saying you're old. I remember the 90s.
I'm still young and fun.
And so Google wasn't around. There wasn't any online tutorials.
There was nothing, bro.
So how was that learning curve? And did you have help? Well, of course you were in school. So how'd that work out?
I'm going to flash back to my mentor. I hope you don't mind me putting him on blast like this. But when we was in high school, me and my partner, Osmond, we would cut school. Because Sano lived on the west side where our school was. So we would cut school, go to Sano's house, and then we would drive downtown and we would expropriate art supplies. So that skill set of expropriation transferred to books, because in order for us to learn that, we couldn't Google shit. There were no artists in our community other than us. We were the artists that we knew in our community. So there was no access but the bookstore. The bookstore was the closest access to knowledge. But then back in the day, books for Photoshop and Illustrator, these books was $40, $50. And so, got to do what you got to do. So a lot of those books made it home in book bags so that we could properly use them in the knowledge. So that's how we dealt with the learning curve. Like we just, we had to liberate books.
And read them.
And read them.
Devour that.
And devour that. Like literally devour. I would spend weekends going page by page, chapter by chapter through a book to learn how to do a certain technique or to learn a certain component of the program. So nowadays, even with you doing these podcasts and with technology, there's absolutely no excuse for any artist to learn something. My lesson to artists who are really serious, you can't just ask somebody who did it all the time. A lot of times people want to see you, dig up your own dirt. There's a wealth of resources out for people to be able to learn how to do certain things. And for me personally, when I see that a person engages in that educational activity on their own, then I'm more willing to help them versus them just asking me, well, how did you do this and this, that, and the other? And it's like, yo, I didn't have shit when we did this. We had to find a way, learn a way. So the respect level is different when all of the resources are out there for you and you don't want to go use them to search.
To dig for them,
Yeah, because like back in the day, we stayed in the library and we stayed in the bookstore to learn.
Yeah. And that's that. I'm gonna just say something about that. It kills me to get some of the messages I get or texts, and it's a question, a simple question. I'm like, you could have Googled that. Dude. That question you could have put that on Google and got the answer instead of using my brain.
when I get questions like that, I don't even respond to it because, or what I used to do is I would respond. There is no excuse for you to not be able to know this question, because they're usually questions that you can Google. Like, just for the record, to this day, when I haven't a roadblock about something I need to know, let's say like maybe charging for a certain type of project, I go do research. I research companies, I Google, get information, go to message boards, read conversations about what people do so that I can pattern my cost, my fee, my technique, my procedure based off of other successful people that's doing it.
Yeah.
I still don't have anybody that I can necessarily go to and say, hey, how do you do this?
Right.
When I moved to Atlanta, I had Charlie Palmer. Charlie Palmer was my main inspiration in becoming an independent graphic designer, because he had a company at the time that I became familiar with in December 1995. I still have the edition of How magazine. His company was featured as a design company. Mm-hmm. So when I moved to Atlanta, I sought him out, and developed a relationship with him, so that when I needed those key, I didn't blow him up every day. Mm-hmm. When I got a project and I was like, yo, I really need to know how to facilitate this project, then that's when I would give him a call. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I still do my own research when I don't know something.
Right.
Because now it's easier for me to find the information. Yeah. And so for people who don't know, well, what does the black arrow do in Illustrator? Google it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so did you think it was, so I guess all that reading and you applied it, I wanted to ask if it was easy or hard, but it's kind of hard to even explain whether it was easy or hard to learn Illustrator.
Nothing is easy when you're trying to learn. I mean, Illustrator, I'm still learning Illustrator every day. I still look through tutorials. I still look up tutorials. I still learn every day. Now, my core skills, I can get on. I can do the things I need to do to make money. Logo design, flyer, music packages, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. But I always want to push the envelope. I just learned something new in Illustrator about a month ago just by looking up something on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But the hard part is the sacrifice and the discipline, because a lot of times when my friends was outside hanging out and doing cool shit, I was reading a book or on a computer trying to figure out how I could not work for somebody.
Yes.
And so the hard part was implementing the discipline to not be discouraged or distracted to get the information. Mm-hmm. And so again, to this day, I still read. I still look at the Creative Cloud tutorials to figure out what the hell they doing with the program so that I can keep up.
Yeah. All right. So do you have a favorite tool in Illustrator? The pen tool, brush tool, pencil tool?
Everybody wants to know how you get the sharp, smooth lines. Point, click, drag. Point, click, drag. Or as OG Abel says, he hashtags in his and it's funny because I see the humor in it, because he probably gets asked the same questions all the time. So now he tags his pieces. When he finishes, he'll do a pencil sketch and he'll post the Illustrator piece and he'll post hashtag OG Abel filter applied. So for some people to think like he went from this sketch and he ran a filter. And that's not the case. It's a lot of point, click, point, click. Yeah. Click. An illustration that I'm really into, like this piece right here, my promotional postcard.
Yes.
This is at least 60 to 80 hours.
Yeah.
From drawing the sketch to doing the vector work to arranging all the shapes and making it final. At least 60 to 80 hours worth of work. And a lot of that is point, click, point, click. I don't use auto trace, on my work. Everything is just manual, grueling labor.
Yeah. And I like to think of Illustrator as a place where you control every little aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's why you get, when you control it, see, the pen tool is the ultimate control. Now, you can use the Wacom tablet, and you can use the blob brush, and you can draw your outlines, or you can use the brush tool to get certain things. But it's an automated process between you pushing that stylus and it coming out on the computer. Now you can adjust settings to get it as clean as possible, but nothing is as clean as offers as much control as the pen tool. So point, click, drag. Learn those Bezier tools and learn how to pull the handles to get the smooth.
That's right.
The key is the fewer points you use, the more smoother your line work will be. And these are all things that I had to learn over time.
Yeah.
So my first tool that I would tell anybody to master is the pen tool.
That's right. Yeah. That's why I call Vector Maestros the classes. I call them Explore Your Creativity and Master the Pen Tool. Like that's
the pen tool is the premier prime tool in Illustrator. Like I can create everything in Illustrator. Like they can take the type tool, they can take everything away because I can draw my own type. I just trace it with the pen tool.
That's right.
You know, I trace all my pieces with the pen tool, so they can take all the tools. Or if Illustrator was just the pen tool and the ability for me to create just vector work from, I would still be good.
Yeah,
because I'll
export it as vector and use the pen tool. That's it.
Yeah, I would
Nothing else.
send the vector to Photoshop and then I would color it in Photoshop if
Right.
that's all I would do
Yeah.
with Illustrator. So the pen tool is the main tool you want to master
Gotcha.
in Illustrator.
Yep. So it's workflow and equipment. So I see a sketchbook, and you mentioned a sketch in one of the pieces you were showing us online a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
So do you start with a pencil sketch? Do you scan? What's your process like?
Yeah, most of my work starts with a pencil sketch. I have a series of sketchbooks. I have a sketchbook that I use primarily for just drawing type or letters. I have a sketchbook that I use primarily for my own personal work, and then I have a general sketchbook where I may draw sketch for clients. Mm-hmm. So I keep the energy separated. Pencil sketch, take a picture with my phone, email it to myself, or download it to the computer from the phone, and set it up on a layer, which will be like the tracing layer. Dim it out, and then I usually trace in red, and then just point, click, point, click, point, click around that. You know, I primarily work on my laptop, as you can see here. I don't use a mouse. I very rarely, if at all, use my Wacom tablet in Illustrator. Everything is done with the trackpad. So, yeah, that's... I don't even understand how I got into using the trackpad. I think I broke a mouse one time. I had to finish a project, and I was like, I got to use this trackpad. And I figured it out. So, using a trackpad to me is like anybody else using a mouse.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's a lot more convenient. It keeps me close to the keyboard, and I'm very big on command keys and shortcuts. So the closer my hand is to the keyboard, the quicker I can move around and do things.
Yeah, I like to tell artists that you gotta use what you got.
Oh yeah,
you know, just use what you got, and don't worry about anything else. Once you can afford other things, you can get other things. But for 15 years, all I used was a mouse. And I can draw an Illustrator in Photoshop with a mouse.
If you had to, because I used to. But then when I got my first Wacom tablet, I was like, yo, this is how this shit is really supposed to work.
That's right.
This is how it's supposed to be. Because for me, drawing with a mouse is like trying to draw with a brick.
Yeah.
But I used to do it because I couldn't afford a tablet, and that was the only thing
That's right.
to do. So I used to be in Photoshop in 93 with the mouse, you know. Because that's what it was. And then eventually I got a tablet and another tablet, and I just got this tablet, you know, so that I can get back in and do more painterly style work in Photoshop. But yeah, you got to use the tools that you have, and the main tool is to learn how to use the pen tool in Illustrator. You know.
Gotcha. So, do you use any other vector software that have you tried any?
Nope.
No?
I don't see the reason to, because all those other programs are the children of Adobe Illustrator. Like, there's one Manga Studio, I would probably mess around with that because it's a stripped down version of Illustrator where it primarily places the focus on doing vector work for illustration. So you don't have the bulky other tools that Illustrator has to do other things.
Yeah.
But I've never used it because shit, I use Illustrator.
Yeah, you know, straight.
And I pay for that, so I use that.
You got the Creative Cloud.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, so I was gonna ask you if you check out any blogs or tutorials, but you mentioned that already. Is there a particular website you go to, or just Google it, or what?
Let me look at my bookmarks.
So you got some bookmarks.
Oh, definitely.
Check.
I have a tutorials folder.
Wow.
So for Illustrator, I usually go to Vector Tuts, tortuts.com. Digital art. I mean, y'all gotta Google this shit. Like, this is how I found them. Nobody told me.
Right.
Like, vector tutorials, Google, and you'll get all the sites that I go to. There's no mystery. There's no hidden, secret, forbidden knowledge. You just gotta search for it. But I have a bookmark folder for Photoshop tutorials, Illustrator tutorials that range from doing certain effects to range for understanding better usage of certain tools. You know, like I said, the learning process is ongoing. I make it a project where in my mind I have an image or a particular style that I'm trying to create that I might not know how to convey from my pencil sketch in Illustrator. So I got to look for it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. How do we get from here to there?
Exactly.
That's right. So social links. Where do we find you online?
MisterSoul216. That's on Instagram. That's on Twitter. That's my website, MisterSoul, MisterSoul216.com. And then on Facebook, I have a Facebook page. It's facebook.com/MR_SOUL216. And I have a Pinterest page that I'm still trying to figure out how to use. Most of my activity is Instagram. No, I post on Instagram, and that goes to everywhere else. So if you follow me on Instagram, you're good to go.
Word. So the last, any last words of advice? The pen tool was something you mentioned a lot. Anything else?
Know what it is that you're trying to master. Like, you know, I'm a rare breed. Myself and Flux is probably one of the only people, you know, in Atlanta who shares my skill set. And what I mean by that is I can paint in acrylics, I can do marker renderings, I can do pen and ink, I can do all of the traditional illustration stuff. But then I can also go to Illustrator and I can design logos, I can do illustration, and I can do design graphics and layout. That's rare because not everybody can do that. So if you're not strong in illustration, but you're good at logos, do logos. You know what I'm saying? Focus on a particular area of Photoshop, of Illustrator, that would allow you to master a set of tools to do those things. Case in point, if you are real big into designing logos, then you want to learn the pen tool, the type tool, the shapes panel, using the compound tools, like all these different tools will help you construct better logos. So just know what it is that you're trying to master at first. If you feel that you have the ability to bounce around like I do, like, you know, or like I said, Flux, and being able to do illustrations and understanding how to use the tools to do all of these things, then by all means explore. But Illustrator is an evolving program. You know, as you follow with Creative Cloud, they always update something. I'm still using Illustrator skills from Illustrator 5, which is the pen tool. I'm going to keep mentioning the pen tool.
That's right.
Because that's what it is. They can change everything as long as they don't change the pen tool.
Yeah.
You know, and that's pretty much it. Like, you know, read, study, you know, do research, you know, hit a couple of brick walls before you ask somebody, because the information is there and there are no shortcuts. The shortcut is Google, you know, but the shortcut isn't asking somebody who's done it already without doing your own research, because you're not going to have the appreciation of learning what you've been taught unless you go through the process of learning it yourself. And that's it, you know, produce quality work.
This was your Vector Maestros podcast. Tune in to YouTube for free tutorials and tips on Adobe Illustrator. Follow us on Facebook and check out the Vector Maestros online course to master the pen tool at vectormaestros.com. Until next time, this is DTM at vectormaestros.com.